Good morning. So today I'm reading Making It Big by Femi Otedola. Life lessons from a life in business, because I own a business, and with each read I'm reading one chapter a day. Let's say it's 33 chapters, so by at least 33 days I should be done with reading this book. One, I'm starting my year being consistent with whatever I try to do, and also I'll be taking actions with whatever I read in this book daily in my business. That's one of the reasons I'm reading this book. So let's get in. You can read with me. Thank you. So I read the foreword already. I'm just going to start from. I read the introduction already. I'm going to start from lesson 1. Lessons from a life in business. 1. One weekend in 1973, my father's boss strolled into our living room on Victoria Island, Festive Road in Lagos. John George Lutry, a big blonde-haired American, was managing director of Mobil Oil Nigeria, and my father, Michael Otedola, was his corporate affairs manager. As Lutry came in, shook hands with my dad, and took his seat, something else was playing on my mind. I wanted to cut his fingernails and charge a modest fee for the service. I had been cleaning and trimming nails for my parents' visitors since I was 7 years old, but today was going to be different. This was a big fish, as they say. My memory of the event is fuzzy, but I imagine that the huge Miss Sonia spoke with a travel-tempered Midwest accent. He hosted Christmas and Boxing Day parties for the company's employees at his house in the opulent Ikoyi neighborhood of Lagos. He would go on to become Mobil's youngest MD and run the company's operation in places as varied as Libya, Nigeria, and the UK, retiring as Vice President of Worldwide Exploration and Production. And here I was, an 11-year-old who wanted to give his dad's boss a manicure and pedicure. I was prepared. I had a nice set of clippers and invoice receipt book that I did start using with my bemused customers. I was shy but confident, self-assured enough to sell all my services to anyone who entered my turf, but reserved enough to know the line that separated cute from intrusive. I did not hesitate to ask my father's big boss if I could cut his nails for a modest fee. Perhaps he was just being kind to me, or maybe he genuinely wanted to have his nails cut that weekend. I would never know. He stretched out his hand and I started the job. He then stretched out his leg and I completed the job. I cleaned things up, got paid, and pulled out my booklet, which is a cardboard paper copy pages, to write him a receipt. I cannot remember the exact sum, but I think it was 20 kobo, about 13 cents. That was the beginning of my entrepreneur voyage. Many business names ended with co, so I named my venture Femco, a play on my first name that I thought sounded legitimately business like. I enjoyed trimming nails. It was fun, and it's an icing on the cake. I was getting paid for it. In this chapter, the lessons I intend to provide is how to use little things to hone your skills for the bigger challenges. Cutting nails in your parents' living room is not the surest path to becoming a billionaire. It's certainly not the most exciting business choice if you want to rule the world, but something that simply can help you along as you take those first little steps. It taught me things like having a nose for opportunity, creating value and getting rewarded, summoning the courage to pitch for a job, nurturing your commercial sense, getting yourself organized, and having fun while pursuing your passion. And do not forget that stooping to conquer is a time tested principle. I bent down to cut nails, but I did not stand up empty-handed. What did my nail trimming business as an adolescent teach me about entrepreneurship? Start as early as you can, even if they pay you a pittance. Start as early as you can, even if they pay you a pittance. There were things I learned from this venture that would later help me in the big adventures of life. For one, I could smell an opportunity. People needed a trim because nails inevitably grew. There was a ready market for me as I rode on the back of my parents, whose visitor I cultivated as my customers. Having an advantage is invaluable to success in business. I couldn't go to the living rooms of other people to conduct this business. At the same time, if I were cutting the nails for other kids my age, they surely would not pay me. There was no advantage to targeting them in that line of business. What's more, I began to understand that business processes help you become and stay organized. So I got the receipt book to keep records. Number two, do not wait for the perfect time or until you need money. Create value now. I have to say that I was not in a dying situation. I was a primary school puppy. I did not need to fend for myself. My parents were comfortable, so there was no pressure to earn my pocket money. However, I possessed an instinct for commerce that would not be tamed or clouded by any sense of comfort or feeling of youthfulness. My parents were receiving visitors and I was not going to let them come and go just like that. I saw the value in cutting their nails and making their fingers look good. One of the fundamental drivers of business is the creation of value. The moment you have something to offer, no matter how seemingly little it is, you can use it to activate your business sense. 3. Identify courage and nurture business argument wherever you find it. My parents knew all along that I was business minded. My father, in particular, identified that trait in me very early in my life and did not make any attempt to dissuade me. He didn't deter me from marketing my nail cutting venture to his guests. I had many customers and all of them were his friends, mostly from Mobile. I saved my coins in a colo, a pinky bank that I bought with my income. I kept the money there until I opened an account with Federal Savings Bank, which catered to low-income earners and students. With my savings growing, I began to think big. The more I cut nails, the more I grew in confidence. I was the managing director and chief financial officer of my own business. I was making money in my little way, saving it when my mates would rather spend theirs and still getting my regular pocket money from my parents. What else could a little boy ask for? In no time, I started carrying a briefcase. My friends and classmates at the university staff school would laugh at the sight of this kid with a briefcase. I had my father to give me one of his old ones, which he did so with no questions asked. I wanted to look like a big man and businessman, like the entrepreneurs and the senior officers in the private and the public sectors who all carried briefcases. That was the profile of a successful executive. I cannot remember how long I carried the briefcase, but I stopped trimming nails when I got into Methodist Boys High School in 1974. Tapping into the huge opportunity. I zeroed in another opportunity in the early 1990s, and it led to the birthing of my first real business. Many pursuito. I need my dictionary. False, fake, or pretending to be something. Financial institutes were cropping up in my country in the late 1980s and early 1990s, promising their depositors unimaginable returns of 100% a month. Some of these, which were nicknamed Wonder Banks because they promised medically returns, were paying deposits 50% interest upfront. It was all the range driven by the harsh economic realities of the day in Nigeria. People needed to make money, and this was all too easy. No hard work, no stress. Just give your money to a Wonder Bank, and you did be pocketing ridiculous high interest. It was too good to be true, but too tempting to resist. In Port Harcourt, the capital of the country's oil-rich river, there was a Wonder Bank on Agri Road named Resources Managers Limited, nicknamed Umunna Bank. It was owned by a businessman, Umunna, and was paying 100% monthly interest on deposit. This attracted thousands of customers who kept spreading the news about the wonders of Umunna. In Lagos, there were more than a dozen Wonder Banks, and the most prominent being Forum Mortgage Finance Limited, set up by Duo Owolabi, an accountant. The Wonder Banks seemed to have the world at their feet. They rented big offices. Their employees drove flashy cars and dressed ultra stylish. They made conventional bankers envious. Traditional bank lost customers in droves and saw their fortunes plummet as all roads led to the Wonder Banks. But the bubble soon burst as the world discovered it was all a Ponzi scheme. using new depositors' cash to pay existing customers and recycling deposits again and again until the market was saturated and everything crashed. It was seriously simple trick. If you collect 10,000 from someone and pay him 5,000 interest upfront, he will become what Stalin called a useful idiot. He will become a free advertiser as he deposits more money and boasts of his success and trailing others with his overnight wealth. If you add an incentive like a bonus for every new customer he brings in, he will even market the dubious scheme to his closest friends and family. But the interest rate is unsustainable and the Ponzi scheme will inevitably come crashing down. There will be a diminishing rate of new depositor and a resulting shortfall of funds to pay the interest promised to the old investors. The customers will eventually lose the other half of their deposits. Paying 100% monthly interest will attract depositors, but they will certainly lose all their money down the line. There are those who suggest getting in on a Ponzi scheme early and cashing out early before everyone cashes on. I say to them that by the time you hear of a Ponzi scheme, it's already too late. It is a surefire losing proposition. The Wonder Bank phenomenon set me thinking, and I concluded that since people always needed money to finance businesses and a desired lifestyle, I could offer them credit for a little monthly interest. These were the factors that led to me setting up Center Force and the vital business lesson I learned along the way. Take advantage of a poorly executed model and clean it up. As the fly-by-night finance houses crumbled like biscuit tales of woe by customers who did lose their life savings dominated the news. As I read these stories, it dawned on me that people genuinely needed fast cash for personal needs, but were finding it hard to secure their reliable sources. Regular banks wouldn't give them loans, and lending rates was sky high. For those who were lucky enough to get one, some needed funds to do quick business, such as financing LPOs, but the banks were unfriendly. That's why it was so easy for Wonder Banks to con the public with their promises of quick returns. In January of make time, do not despair and unexpected changes in circumstances. In January 1995, I finally decided to provide the service that would give people fast cash that was repayable on a short-term basis. My father was no longer governor. I needed to start something on my own, having served more or less as his assistant from his campaign period to when General Sani Abacha, a Nigerian military officer, overthrew the democratic government in November 1993. In a sense, it took the coup for me to start thinking of a line of business that would be entirely my own, not connected to my father or the family in any way. The collapse of the finance houses provided the opportunity for me to put my brains and talent to use. I wasn't interested in running a finance house, and definitely not the way the Wonder Banks did it. I was not going to get involved in collecting deposits and promising big returns. I obtained a license from the local government to set up a money lending business. That was how Center Force, a much bigger proposition than nail trimming, was born. This concept was similar to, but different in many ways from what it is today called microfinancing. Meticulous execute your idea and never fail to ask for help. Center Force was a small setup that I started with only 2 employees, Bola and Ido. They were responsible for sales and marketing. They put the word out, bringing people in to apply for loans. Our office was a bungalow in the Victoria Island Extension Business District of Lagos. I had limited capital, and as demand grew, we soon ran out of funds. I did underestimate what I was getting into, and it became clear that I needed help. I had borrowed once before, but it was personal bank loan for just 1 million. Now I needed as much as 30 million to sustain and expand my new business. With a stiff dose of courage, I approached the Society General Bank of Nigeria for the loan. It was certainly a step than asking to cut the fingernails of family friend. But SGBN looked at our business case, saw the value we were creating, and lent the 30 million with an interest rate of 15% per annum. This was a huge help. I was lending at 10% per month and I was making money. It was profitable because it did not cost me too much to set up. I had the startup cash and got boosts from the loan. As word spread, people flocked to us for fast cash. Number 4, grow gradually and steadily and master how to plug leakage and halt abuses. Center Force quickly grew its customer base and workforce. From just 2 employees, we soon had 20. Within 2 years, the working capital of 10 million grew to more than 100 million. Surprisingly, loan repayment was about 90%, which was very, very good for business. Even those who defaulted did not get away with it because we sold their collateral to cover the loans. They couldn't complain. We treated everyone fairly and gave them enough room to pay. Both we and our customers were making money, so it was a win-win situation. My best customers was Alhaji Abubakar Aliyu, head of the petroleum company AAO Oil Limited. He was taking loans regularly, 3 million, 4 million, sometimes up to 6 million, and we paying at the interest rate of 12.8% a month. We were happy to do business with one another. Another sizable client was a company doing printing and packaging, producing diaries, calendars, and recording sleeves. We did good business together too. Number 5, don't start a business because you want an empire. Center Force started small but soon surpasses my expectations. Why? I wonder, did I not dream big and start big in the first place? The reality is that the idea for a business doesn't always come from wanting a world-dominating empire. It more likely comes from needing to do something to fend for yourself and your family, and it goes from there. So the guy who sets up that little business, it is equivalent to a 9 to 5 job with a salary. It is for sustenance, and you take it from there. If God blesses it, it grows. For the lucky few, you end up with a large business that succeeds beyond your wildest dream. 6, do not shun multiple streams of income. Center Force was a modest dream that grew big. It gave a platform to meet with some big guys in the society. I became friends with the military brands in general. Abacha's government, they included Lieutenant General Ishaya Bamiyayi, who was Lagos Garrison Commander, Brigadier Patrick Aziza, who had been a military governor, garrison commander, and minister of communication, Colonel Olugasoyi Oyilola, then military administrator of Lagos, and General Bashir Mageshe, the military administrator of Sokoto State, who was garrison commander and would go on to serve in the government of President Mohammed Buhari as a minister of defense. That presented another opportunity. I started executing contracts with military figures, and the most significant of which were to supply cars. It appeared that once the military brass made some money, the first thing they wanted to do was buy cars. Jumping at that opportunity, I was always there to source vehicles and make money. I supplied them with more than 40 cars during that period. It was part of the purview of Center Force. How to listen to that inner voice and take nudges seriously. By 1997, I was already losing interest in finance. Doing the same thing all the time just wasn't for me. I felt a need to be challenged, and I knew it was time to move on to something else, but I had no clue what it would be. There's a little secret I have to share. My daughter Ife Oluwa inadvertently played a significant role in my next move, which would catapult me to a new height in business and nation life. She was just 5 at that time. A teacher at grad school asked her, "What is your father's occupation?" She innocently replied, "Sleeping." Admittedly, I used to be a late riser since I was always in bed when she set out for school, and she wasn't getting a good morning hug from that. She had every reason to believe my occupation was sleeping. I was coming across as a jobless dad. It jolted me. My wife Nana would get up at 6:30 a.m. and head to work at 7. I usually left home at around 11. I finally told myself, pull it together, man, get serious and set up a proper business. I had to rise from my slumber to get something else going. I was making good money from the car supply contract, but nothing was demanding or challenging about providing army generals with cars. I was partying in nightclubs through the night and sleeping half the time. I had to do something more concrete and satisfying. That was when I conceived Xenon Petroleum and Gas Limited. And here's what I learned in the process. 1. Providence plays a significant role in our lives. Again, there is a backstory which I can only attribute to God's providence. I had wanted to do something else but had no clear idea what it might be. Something in 1998, a major failure at the Marina Power Substation plunged the city of Ikeja into 2 weeks of darkness. I used to get diesel to power my generators in our home from my friends in the military, when Aziza and then Magashi were Lagos garrison commanders, but I was caught out of luck this time. Out of the darkness, a ray of light lit my path and pointed me to the next line of business of selling diesel. I got home from work one day and realized there was not a drop of diesel in the house. I was living on Sir Michael Otedola Crescent, named for my dad, in the Ikeja government reserved area, a high-ended housing development. With the entire property in darkness, I moved my family to Sheraton Hotels and Towers. While I scouted for diesel, I called a friend, Tayo Ayeni, the founder of Sky Might Motors, one of the retailers I knew from my car supply business, to ask about his diesel supply. He mentioned Flame Petroleum, owned by one Dr. I.B. Kachukwu, a man of many talents. Kachukwu was a lawyer who also ran a popular magazine called Hint. He had worked in Mobile for many years, becoming general counsel for the Nigerian operation, and he did go on to serve as Minister of State for Petroleum Resources between 2015 and 2019. I asked my office, to contact his company, and I learned that they had diesel at 14 naira a liter. We paid for 2,000 liters to have my home reservoir filled. The fuel did not show up as scheduled, even though I had paid in full. The following day, still no diesel. Day 3, the same. On the 4th day, I was driving home from my office in Victoria Island, and I saw a broken down truck with a flame. A broken down truck with a Flame Petroleum logo on the 3rd Milan Bridge. I parked and approached the driver. "You were supposed to bring me diesel days ago," I said. The guy checked his chart, located my name, and replied, "Tomorrow will come at 11 a.m. This time they came as promised. My house was new, and the way I had designed it, I had a clear view of the outside through an all glass wall. I saw an Asian dirty truck drive into the compound, leaking engine oil and diesel. This really irritated me, and I rushed downstairs like a man possessed. "Move this truck out of here," I shouted. They pushed it out, and we spread newspaper and rag on the ground to protect it during a second attempt. As the truck moved back in and discharged the diesel, still leaking here and there, I stood and watched intently. I knew instinctively that I could do this better. I told myself the business was not well managed or presented. I could clean it up and give it good image. I had trimmed and cleaned fingernails before. In a sense, another such opportunity was staring me in the face. After the truck left, I sent it for the manager of Flame Petroleum, and he came to see me in the office straight away. I said, "I want to set up a diesel business. Will you work for me?" He declined the offer. Much later, he approached me for a job when he realized my outfit was first class, and I employed him. Number 2, do your research and think about your business name. As soon as I made up my mind to go into diesel trade, I started research, every aspect of it. "You can clean up this business," kept ringing in my head. I had value to add. I mentioned it to my friend Tunde Folawiyo, managing director of the Yinka Folawiyo Group, which has interest in energy, shipping, and real estate. Tunde introduced me to Victor Enelama, who worked at Nigeria's Department of Petroleum Resources. The agency had undergone myriad transformation as the country oil industry grew and evolved. It began as a section under the Ministry of Lagos Affairs in the colonial government, went on to become the Ministry of Petroleum Affairs, and merged with an old Nigerian National Oil Corporate in the 1970s. It then became a department of the subsequent Nigerian National Petroleum Corporate. Absorbing the Petroleum Inspectorate, Victor filled me in on the requirements for breaking into the sector, one of which was to get a license from the DPRO, the industry regulator. So where did the name Xenon come from? As soon as I decided to go into the business, I started thinking about a compelling name for my company. I discussed with my friend Sunday we tossed around possible names. It occurred to me that when I did other cars for Mercedes-Benz, they asked if I wanted xenon lights. Mercedes-Benz has just developed the technology which generated a bright fluorescent like glow. It struck me like a lightning bolt. Xenon. I love the notion of the illumination. Diesel lights, bright lights. I would call my company Xenon. I called a graphic artist who used to work at the Insight Communication, a big Nigerian advertising agent, and I asked him to design a logo. However, I didn't want the name to be confused with Exos. I asked the designer to try changing the X to Z and put a flame where the O was. Perhaps we could make the word blue and the flame yellow, orange, and red. Thus, the Xenon brand was born. Start where you are with what you have. I started Xenon with 15 million in capital, but did not take a loan. Every cent was from my savings. We used my Center Force office for months, worked through the startup phase, and got the business established. We then moved to another rented office on Tayamo Savage, a high-end residential and a commercial street on Victoria. And from there, I proceeded to expand the business. I bought a second-hand Toyota van and employed a driver, Samson Okpali. Initially, it was just the two of us in the van with drum of diesel in the back. My mind went back to that encounter with the rundown leaky truck, the delay in supplying my house during a sustained blackout, and the diesel stains on my front yard, the clean up afterwards. I was certainly not going to serve prospective clients in beat up old vehicles. I hired Gilberta Construction to fabricate 2 fuel storage tanks, but they weren't delivered on time. I complained and I was told again that they were on their way. The tanks were ultimately delivered 6 months behind schedule. The business was growing. We needed to scale up our facilities and capacity, and the delay in getting the storage tanks installed was a real setback. There were already some influence players in the industry. One was Jean-Claude Mayer, a Frenchman who owned Maca International Limited, who was on the top of the industry. The others were Tony Onu, the euphoric, and Oba Baturi Akinrutan, the founder of Obat Petroleum and Oil Limited, who would go on to become the traditional ruler of his people, the Ugbo Kingdom of Ilaje in Nigerian's Ondo state. These 3 were the most prominent people I met in business. I would go to Mayer's place to buy truckloads of diesel, which I would pump into drums and drive to customers' location for delivery. In addition to the initial van, I also rented various trucks before eventually purchasing a new fleet of vehicles. 4. To prosper, accept that nothing is beneath you. In the beginning, I went around pushing diesel, riding in the van beside Samson, the driver. I always wore jeans and a polo shirt as we went from door to door to market or deliver the product. When we met the nightclubs on weekends, my friends would tease me like a question, where is your truck? They did laugh when I walked in and asked, are you here to sell diesel? I took the wisecracks in stride. I didn't feel that selling diesel was beneath me. I had my wife and children to look after. There were school fees to pay. I had to survive and face up to my responsibility. Maximize opportunities and expand to meet demand. After I started this small scale selling, I came to realize that the entire country was running on diesel. Homes, office, factories, trucks, and trawlers. The energy situation was dire with constant blackouts and shortage, and the demand for diesel was enormous. The opportunity was certainly there. We had to rise to the occasion. I got to work on an ambitious marketing strategy. I employed 14 sales executives, all young, brilliant, and driven women, and gave them new cars. In my experience, female salespeople were more effective in convincing prospective clients, perhaps because of their commitment, ability to charm, and reluctance to take no for an answer. It also helped that the new trucks I did order from the Turkish manufacturer BMC had arrived, which we started using for home delivery. With the marketing team out on an aggressive sales drive, the orders came rushing in. I had given them a list of big companies next to Coca-Cola, Flour Mills of Nigeria, the Dangote Group, and they closed one deal after another. I would pay Maca for Rafric for supplies. They would send trucks loaded with diesel and did add my margin, which came to about 8 naira per liter. Ask for help when you need. When I realized in 1999 that I needed trucks to meet the untenable demand for diesel, I asked my dad for a loan. He gave me €250 at 1% interest. With a 5-year note, you might expect that he would provide me with interest-free loan, but he was a shrewd businessman and wanted me to learn the ropes properly. In the real world, nothing is free. I would have paid double-digit interest if I did gone to a bank, and the terms would likely have been less than 5 years. I jumped at my dad's generous offer. I started buying diesel in bulk and renting storage tank. It was a significant leap for me. I still needed to buy more trucks as we kept expanding. I decided I was not borrowing anymore, so I sold my house of 40 million naira, intending to use the proceeds to grow the business. I did build it for less than 11 million in 1996, but I did had to get a loan when I ran out of cash, and I still had 2 million debts left to pay in 2000. So that was not bad in the scheme of things. In the scheme of things, we moved from the beautiful mansion in Ikeja to a rented 4-bedroom house in Victoria, just behind the Mega Plaza shopping mall. I rented from Chief Bode Akindele Ibadan's Power Koyi, a class of traditional Yoruba chiefs responsible for administrating trade and commerce. Among other interests, he owned Ferrygate Group Limited, a real estate development and a management company based in the UK. Whether I owned or rented, the most important thing for me was to have a roof over my head. The lesson here is that if you have a big dream, support it with all the resources available to you. Place yourself close to those with influence and capital. If I was going to make this venture truly successful, I needed more capital. As was the case of the Center for Demand was growing astronomically. The market was consuming diesel at a vigorous clip. Having sold my house, mobilized all my savings, and taken a massive loan from my dad, I still needed more cash to meet the demand and grow bigger. I might have started small, but I would never stop dreaming. That was the fun of it. Planting a little seed, nurturing it, and making it grow apace. Despite my earlier vow not to borrow from banks, I needed extra liquidity, and it had to come from the big traditional lenders. Many Nigerian banks had their office on Victoria Island, where their managing directors live. Moving there and living close to the banking executive would help. No banker would approve a 1 billion loan for your business without knowing your house. No banker will come and meet me in my old Ikeja neighborhood. Location is critical in incorporating packaging. I remember a party I did had at Ikeja House. It was attended by the up and coming young business people of the era. They included Bukola Saraki of Society General Nigeria and the future governor of Kwara and eventually Senate President of the National Assembly, Shengo Agbeji of the Guarantee Trust Bank, and Tayo Amusa, the property developer who was the chairman of the retail and the real estate giant Persianians Nigeria Limited. They left my place at around 5 a.m. to return home to Victoria Island. These guys liked me. I realized that's why they drove all the way to my part of the town for the get-together. But I needed to move, if only to be close to the banking chiefs who didn't yet know or like me. I had to be strategic. Anything could go wrong with the calculated risks I was taking, but you must take risks at some point in life, especially when you are younger and you can recover quickly if things go wrong. Relocating to Victoria Island was also for my personal convenience. I used to leave my Ikeja home at 5 a.m. and get to the office on Victoria Island at 6 a.m. I did work there until 9 p.m. I would then drive to Fuel Depot near the seaport in Apapa to surprise operation until 1 a.m. I was sleeping just a couple of hours a night. For somebody whose primary activity had until recently been sleeping. As my daughter had observed, that was a radical change, but things were booming and I loved it. Moving to Victoria Island makes sense on many levels. In any case, I had lived here before. When my dad worked at Mobi, we lived on Festival Road from 1972 to 1977. That was in fact where I started cutting nails and writing invoices. In fact, in a sense, I was returning to my roots, to the former headquarters of Femco. This time, though, it was with a heavier briefcase and a much bigger ledger. So I'm going to continue, even if I've been interrupted though. All right. Keep an eye on your debtors and don't be afraid to demand repayment. We faced many challenges in those early days, but we reasoned through them, solved the problems, and continued to build capacity. Although we were getting orders, some of our customers were not paying, and that tied up capital. At the start, when the sales team brought in purchase orders, I would say without hesitation, supply them. But time and again, they failed to pay. Meanwhile, I owed the banks. Interest was piling up. Exasperated, I went early. I don't know the meaning of that word. I went early one morning to the office of the MD of a major civil engineering and construction company. When I arrived, I saw 50 people, poor women, asking for their payment for work they had done. It was heartbreaking. I was yet another service provider that this company had failed to pay. We did be told that the government owed them for big contracts and that they in return could not pay others until they recoup those revenues. I saw that the director had arrived. I could see his car inside the compound. I blocked the gate with my car. I promised myself that I was not leaving and I would not let him leave without my money. The gloves were off. I will not allow anyone to ruin my growing business with their irresponsibility. I got their attention and was invited inside. I met the MDs, a German, and told him off. Look at these poor people. You owe. I shouted at them. You are a big company. You collect money from the government, take it abroad and leave these people high and dry. I told him that if they didn't pay me there and then, I was not leaving. And you are not leaving either, I threatened. They called in the police to remove my car and escorted me off the premises. The police arrived and I shouted them down, telling them I was being robbed by the foreign company. I shouted that I was owed 7.4 million, a vast sum. They had been ordering without paying without any plans to pay. The police quietly left. My next collection call was to a big electronics importer and exporter, and after that I visited a subsidiary of theirs. Both had been taking my diesel but failing to pay. I was ultimately able to collect what I was owed from the three companies and promptly blacklisted them. With such customers, your business will die. I did not need them to survive. Many responsible, upstanding customers were cutting me because diesel was in such a high demand. Industry CEOs were beating a path to my door. The country ran on diesel, and I was there to provide that vital lifeblood. identify opportunities and take over areas of interest. I also faced challenges with transportation as I had no real control over it, and so I concluded that I had to go into the transport business. My friend Biola Akinola accompanied me to Holland in 2002 to buy lightly used trucks and made them look beautiful. I bought 12, then another 8 and another 20. In 2004, I had enough financial muscle to order 100 new trucks from DAF and the Dutch manufacturer. DAF, the Dutch man. I was accompanied to Holland for that purchase by a DAF representative from Nigeria. I now had control over the transport aspect of operations. Step by step, we were inching towards controlling the entire chain, putting every piece of business in our own hands. Still, we faced even more challenges. One evening, I received a purchase order from West African Portland Cement Company for 20 truckloads of diesel. I called one of my old suppliers for help filling the order. I could not provide immediate payment because the banks had closed for the day, but told the fuel company's owner I will send a check. He would have none of it. No bank draft, no product. I was furious. How could he do this to me? I had never owed him, and he had done at least 600 million in business with me. I now had a situation and had called upon someone I considered a trusted supplier. I couldn't believe it. I didn't have 20 truckloads of diesel to deliver and lost the contract. It was painful. That day opened my eyes to another reality. I told myself things had to change. I could not be beholden to these unreliable distributors. Where were these guys getting the diesel from? I assumed it had to be from NNPC, the Nigerian National Oil Company. I vowed that one day I will no longer be reliant. Oh Jesus, English has finished me. Hold on. I'll ask Google to pronounce it for me later. You start pronounce it. Brilliant?
Brilliant, yeah.
Brilliant on them. I took my loss and began casting a wider net for crucial diesel supplies. I met Chief Henry Omorodion of the Oil and Gas Company, Hesmo Nigeria Limited, who agreed to sell to me in bulk. He was getting his allocation directly from NNPC. I also bought from businesswoman Nike Adebayo, who got her products from Obat Oil and Petroleum Limited, which, like Hesmo, got it directly from NNPC. I established good working relationship with them and others and broadened my supply base, allowing me to be reliable, execute more orders. I also started renting storage tanks so we wouldn't have to be running around like crazy trying to fulfill surprise orders. 10. Be available to customers 24/7 and service their needs as soon as possible. One of the advantages I enjoyed was that even if a company CEO called me at 2 a.m. in need of diesel, my drivers were on standby around the clock, ready to load and deliver. It was a big plus for us, and we developed a reputation for being super reliable. Unfortunately, I learned that the drivers were stealing diesel. I dealt with them appropriately. Anyone caught in the act was immediately sacked and handed over to the police. This served as a dirty jet. The crime carried a punishment and we enforced the penalty. Meanwhile, I also made sure to befriend the leaders of the tanker drivers union. In return, they were supportive of Xenon. We invest, consolidate, and shun extravagancy. Number 11. One thing I also did was tell myself not to live extravagantly. I would plug everything I made back into the business. This formula worked well as Xenon grew in capacity and efficiency. Before I knew it, I was in control of diesel supplies to all the big companies. At that point, I decided it was time to stop renting storage tanks and build our own. The tank owners were known for taking money from customers and disappointing them. It made sense to not be at the mercy of these guys. I went to my old friend Tunde, whose family had a cement factory. They had supply space, and I asked if I could lease it. Tunde asked his dad, Chief Wahab for Lawiyo, who agreed and invited me to his Ikoyi home. Emaf Jafira, he encouraged, don't foot drag. He wanted the project to take off immediately and he gave me his blessings. Tunde later handed me a monthly bill of 30 million. I almost fainted. If I had to pay 30 million for rent alone, the business would die. Tunde then cautioned, what if the refinery starts working? I did not respond, but clearly understood the implication. If the refinery started working, there would be no need for middlemen. I needed to build my own tanks. I decided to go to Oscar Ibru of a family of a businessman that had large land holding close to the port in Lagos. He only had space for a single million-liter tank, as the plot behind Ibros was set aside for a shipping container. container business. However, he suggested I approach the container business owner and see if he would do a deal with me. The plot was next to the space leased by Marker, where Jane Cloud Mayer had just completed his 300 million state-of-the-art fuel storage facility. I approached the container company, and to my delight, they gave up the land. And so in 2000, I built my first, second, and third storage tanks. My total investment was 100 million that year, but that was just a start. I continued building tanks. I had also expanded enough to start renting ships. Xenon had blossomed into a major bulk buyer of diesel. The people I bought from shipped products down to my jetty to discharge, but still I was at the mercy of suppliers. If only I could bypass them and get the product directly from NNPC, the sky would be my limit. Fairness and willingness to give more can get you a bigger chunk of market. How did I break into NNPC? In a country where connections seem to count more than competence, I knew I could not just knock on the door of National Oil Company and boast, see how far I have gone, see how big I have become, see how many big companies I am supplying, see how efficient I am. If you are using capacity and competence as criteria to allocate diesel, Xenon Petroleum and Gas should be number one on your list. Things didn't work like that in Nigeria or in the other developing economies. You always need to push from a well-placed someone. Most of those getting allocations did not even own a truck or a tank. I learned that the man in charge of diesel allocation at NNPC, Odekwa Akumhime Oka Isabo, was the person to lobby. I didn't know him, but was chatting one day with Dakpo Abiodun, who would go on to found Hayden Petroleum Limited, and brought up the matter. I delighted to learn that he knew Oka Isabo. Dakpo arranged a call, made the introduction. My son Fewa was born on the 2nd of June 2000 in the hospital UK. On the 9th of June, I traveled for his naming in London, planning to return to Lagos the following day. Several of my friends attended. Tunde Dele Momodu, the Society of Fashion Ovation. Dele Momodu of Ovation, the Society magazine. Demola Adekobe, Tony Saraki, Bukola Saraki's wife, and the former First Lady of Kwara State, the lawyer Tony Pinheiro, and a few others. But duty called back in Nigeria. The day after the ceremony, I grabbed my bag and told my wife I was on my way. She was angry. "You just came and now you are leaving," Nana half shouted. She asked me to stay longer, to be around the new baby and keep her company. I said that I could not, as I had a business to run. I left for Victoria Station and I caught a train at Gatwick Airport. I felt guilty leaving my wife and a newborn, but they were in good hands too, and what beckoned. I was at the airport with my friend Tony Pinheiro. When I saw a guy approach us, he said hello to Tony and completely ignored me. As he walked away, Tony said, "Doesn't your company sell diesel?" Then, "I do, that's all I do." Looking stunned, he said, "Are you on bad terms with that guy?" Who, I asked. Then he dropped the bomb. "That is Oka Isabo, the man responsible for all the Nigerian diesel allocation." I ran after me. "Excuse me, sir," I said respectfully. "I spoke with you on the phone recently." My words came out in semi-coherent stutter. I could not care less. As Pentecostal Christian would say, my miracle was on the way. "Wait," he said as he checked in. I realized we did be on the same floor. I patiently waited until he finished and I walked back up to him. "Sir," I said, "I am Femi Otedola. I spoke to you recently along with our mutual acquaintance Dapo Abiodun regarding diesel allocations for my company Xenon." He remembered, at least seemed to recognize my name. Yes, he said, nodding his head. I stayed with him and chatted until we boarded. He was in business class and I was in first class. When the plane took off and had reached cruising altitude, I went and sat beside him. I needed to position my agenda with him front and center. In a country where you have to befriend people in authority, be able to do big things, you can't afford to miss a golden opportunity like this. Oka Isabo was quietly reserved man and he listened to me thoughtfully. I explained my situation and told him of my diesel needs. He was so impressed with my presentation and proposal that he said I was going to become the king of diesel. Soon enough, I started getting the allocation I needed directly from NNPC instead of through Dakpo. Although my margin was not as significant as I was expecting because of the associated costs, it was still better than buying from intermediaries. But the retail business thrives on volume, and I started getting huge quantities of fuel from NNPC, which made all the difference. Oka Isabo was so impressed with me that he even began advising others to do the business with Xenon. From someone who had initially ignored me, and I almost missed the chance to speak with, this was nothing short of a miracle. always be prepared to take advantage of breakthroughs. Things would only get better when Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo deregulated the diesel market in 2004. NNPC would no longer be the national sole importer. That was my most significant breakthrough in this business. With the enormous store of fuel Zenon had stockpiled for over 4 years, building immense storage capacity, renting ships, and amassing prominent clientele, we were in the best position to control the market. There were no antitrust laws, so a winner takes all instinct rose up in me. Indeed, it took Zenon just a few years to take full control of the country's diesel market. This was how things stood. We'd gone from selling small quantities of diesel out of the drums in 1992, greater than 90% market share. I did gone from driving around in jeans in a second-hand van next to Samson to employing more than 500 workers. I did gone from begging Maka in vain to supply me with 20 trucks to building and running depots that could supply me 2,000 trucks a day. I did gone from literally running after the man in charge of allocation of NNPC to importing diesel inside our own ship. I remember the line in a TV commercial for a popular drink in the 1990s and recited it back to my one skeptical friend. Great things starts from small beginnings. Of course, everything starts small. It all begins as an idea. You start small, then grew. And we grew and grew and grew. The first step to awakening was the inner entrepreneur is to recognize an opportunity when you see it. It's good to start small so you can learn, grow, and scale up in a controlled, orderly fashion as your market expands. Create value to make your product or service attractive and utilize any advantage you have. Be courageous in making business decisions and don't be afraid to keep dreaming. Did you hear that? So these are the takeaways. Yep, so that is lesson 1 from Make It Big. We just completed lesson 1 from Make It Big.